Hello, and welcome everybody back to another episode of the Unily Podcast. We've got loads of exciting content and conversation to dip into with you today. But before we do that, as ever, let's start by getting to know our podcast panelists, our wonderful crew. So turning over to the team, Leslie, you're smiling, you're looking ready to chat to me. How are you doing?
Good. We're over here getting ready for Halloween, my daughter's first Halloween, so we're really excited. Get to go see some family this weekend and wear some costumes.
That's amazing. Now, a little birdie told me that you have orchestrated a family dress up this year. Care to share with our listeners?
We do. We were inspired by The Princess Bride, so classic movie, one of my favorites. So I'm Princess Buttercup, my husband is Wesley, and he only gets to say "as you wish," and my daughter gets to dress up as a rodent of unusual size. Amazing. Hopefully all that candy you collect is going to your daughter and you're not going to be holding too much back for yourselves. You know, it is obviously for them. She can't quite eat it yet, but... Yeah, she might be just a little bit on the side. Well, there you go. This will be your year to really enjoy it. Next year, from then on, that's it. Candy supplies cut off. Perfect. And of course, a number of other panelists with us today as well. So also joined by my wonderful co-host from Unite, Ian DeFiore. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, back by popular demand, as we all know. You can't keep me out of the spotlight after Unite. But it's Obviously good to be here. It's a good Friday. It's good to be chatting with you folks about a really interesting topic today. So I'm happy to dive into it.
Last but by no means least, the wonderful returning superstar that is Kaz Hassan. How are you doing, Kaz?
I'm good. How are you, Matt?
Yes, I'm doing well, thank you. I'm doing well. What about you? I mean, you've got some spooky lighting going on, ready for the podcast today. You getting into the Halloween
theme?
Do.
I was saying every time, do you know what? I should have done orange and green lighting. That would have made sense. Maybe I'll try and switch it halfway through the podcast and see if anyone notices. But yeah, we don't have as big of a Halloween culture over here, I think, compared to the US. However, I'm going to try dress up this year because I've got a Halloween party to go to. I'm going as Ali G, which I don't think is like a... Okay.
Yeah, of course we know who that is.
That's an outfit I respect.
What's good is that I was a bit of a chav when I was 16, 17, so I can just reuse my old gear that I used to wear when I was that age. So good for the environment too.
Yeah, upcycling those clothes. Yeah.
Isn't that always the case? Like when you go to clean out your closet, you're like, oh, but I could use this for a Halloween costume.
Yeah, it's always too soon to get rid of clothes. I think that's the mentality we all get stuck in. Okay, cool. Well, since we've all been pretty rubbish recently at getting together B-roll, I think we should all share photos of ourselves in our best ever Halloween outfits with Chris, and our wonderful behind-the-scenes man can splice that into various points.
I have a few.
You've got a few? I feel like you're the person who has a few different options to throw into the mix. That is good.
I can tell you go hard every year.
Yeah, you can tell she was excited. She was the first one to mention the outfits, and I was like, okay, here we go.
One year, actually, some of the UK team was in our Bellevue office, and Rich, I think, FaceTimed his entire family to show them the costumes at the Bellevue office, because we all went all out.
That is amazing. I mean, I love that. We did, because we had the pub quiz the other day in the UK office. Loads of people with fantastic outfits as well.
Can't wait to see those.
I know. Yeah, Miguel did an amazing Superman as well. So when he's not running the Unily global infrastructure, he's dressing up as Superman and flying around the office delivering beers and pizza to people. So
in a way, he is the Unily Superman of global infrastructure. So.
He is.
For
yes. There you go,
Perfect costume.
Exactly. Well, without further ado, we must turn our attention from the excitement and joy of Halloween and fancy dress to, the equally exciting and wonderful topic of digital employee experience, I would argue. And I'm sure my panelists are all completely in agreement on that. But today's topic, getting a little bit more focused, employee apps. hot topic for many reasons, not least of all because the Clearbox Group have recently released their employee app report detailing a lot of insights and information, as well as some tasty screenshots of all the best employee apps out there, which I personally love. But let's kick things off. I mean, for those of our listeners who maybe are unfamiliar with the term, who can tell us a little bit about what we mean by the employee app?
I'm happy to give it a go. That's a tough one because I'm sure. But the employee app it kind of differs a little bit from what we usually kind of refer to as the intranet in that it is a mobile app focused around working for that mobile device. So as an employee, you have a specific app on your phone. On that phone, it's going to have all the great things you might expect, like your news, like your events, but also being able to do certain key activities that you might do on it. It might be looking up what leave you have. It may be checking your shift calendar, something like that. But it's essentially a one-stop shop of an app specifically for employee and the kind of key use cases that an employee does or can do on their phone.
Yeah, kind of intrinsically connected to the digital employee experience, but maybe a little bit more bite-sized or pocket-sized.
Pocket-sized, yeah.
Pocket-sized, yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, cool. Yeah, I think we'll all be in agreement on that. So I guess then, if we then take that forwards, because there's a lot of talk about digital employee experience and the employee app being potentially kind of one device by which we might access that. I think this is probably quite a big question to jump into straight away, but who's the employee app for?
I think that, I guess we're all desk workers. I find that over time, as our own app has got better and better, I actually see myself probably spending more time on our employee app than I do on our desktop experience, which is probably the way it should be because I'm all out and about all the time doing bits and bobs. But I guess that's a testament to show that it is for everyone, because if you're someone that uses a mobile phone, then why not?
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. And, I think that we're good examples, I guess, of people who switch fluidly between like desktop and mobile experiences quite a lot, especially, depending upon the varied roles. Like Kaz, of course, you'll be going doing speaking engagements in different cities around the world. And I guess it's pretty empowering actually to know that everything that you need as an employee is in your pocket, when you can't just kind of get your laptop out in the middle of a conference hall and, but you still have all of that kind of at your fingertips. Now, one of the questions I'd like to pose to the panelists today is, I think employee app is increasing in prominence. I think it's becoming a more popular, more sought after capability within the enterprise, or technology within the enterprise. Why do you think that is?
I mean, I think that as people kind of think about how we want to work in the future and the flexibility that we all kind of have gotten used to and gotten to enjoy this as a byproduct of, COVID and the pandemic, one of the upsides is that we kind of learned how to be a lot more flexible. And I think that as people kind of learn to work in a new way and, travel comes back, business travel comes back, and, working in different offices comes back, I think you don't always have your traditional desktop setup available always. So I think that gives a lot more flexibility in having access to the tools that you need.
Yeah, I think that's certainly like a big part of it. Absolutely. It's almost like inescapable, every podcast, we're like, let's talk about this. And you kind of don't want to keep on mentioning the pandemic, but it's really has fundamentally changed everything we think about when it comes to the world of work and the digital tools needing to, be a little bit more liquid and fill in those gaps, where previously in person kind of would mandate
a certain set of experiences or technology now, things like mobile can rise to prominence. Maybe I'm going to make myself sound old, or maybe I'm going to insult other people on the call, but I grew up without smartphones. That didn't exist when I was younger. I remember my first mobile was a really old hand-me-down flip phone from my dad. It was the Ericsson T28 World. The screen was about this big, and it just kind of like punch a few numbers and make phone calls. I don't think you could even text on that, believe it or not. So yeah, you do have that younger generation coming in who are familiar with all of that in their pocket 24/7, just kind of everything at their fingertips. But the other bit, I think, is that kind of consumer grade experience, right? When you talk about like apps, you talk about like TikTok and Uber and other kind of like super high performing apps that are really well known. They really do just make everything a couple of clicks on tiny, tiny real estate when you think about it, comparatively to other devices.
I can talk a little bit from a product perspective, because you're right, the standard is so high, but in a way it's a gift and a curse, because when the product team were looking at overhauling our employee app, which we did a year or two ago, the standards there's quite a good standard in terms of how mobile apps work in terms of user experience, because yes, the bar is high, but also people know inherently how things work on the mobile, because there's a level of consistency across those top tier of apps. And so you're not looking to essentially with employee app reinvent the wheel. You're looking to essentially dip into the inherent user behaviors that they have from apps like TikTok or like Instagram. They know where the menu is. They know how to flick between content. These are things that we are trying to be like, the employee is going to know how to do that. How can we then repurpose this and make sure that behavior is in the employee app as well? So it is about experience, but the standard is so high, but also it means that we can kind of utilize some of that knowledge that the user has and put it in our employee apps as well.
Yeah, that's true. You get the advantage of the consistent behaviors you can just draw on, rinse and repeat. I think that's an interesting point you made there about, mixed in with those points is around purpose. And I want to kind of explore what's the purpose of an employee app in a moment. But just before I kind of throw that one out there, the point I was going to make is the challenge is huge, to Ian's point, especially when you think about some of these apps like TikTok, which has one purpose, which is to scroll through video content, right? The purpose is clear, and while there's like posting videos and things like that, it's all quite focused. So you can kind of do less with more and kind of really hone in on that. The employee experience, conversely, is complex, fragmented, highly personalized to role, function, region. This is a perfect time. Let's dig into it more. Leslie, you work with clients all over the world with various different jobs. What's the purpose of the employee app? What kind of use cases do you hear about from people implementing them?
I think that a lot of it, a lot of it has been traditionally focused on workers that are kind of out and about. So those personas that are either out on sales calls, traveling quite a bit, or working on retail is a great example of people who have really, even, before employee apps were as big as they are now, they were thinking about how can we meet people where they're at and help them get the information that they need when they're live and in front of a client, for example. And so retail's been one of my best examples, working with a few different retail clients for those employee personas that are in person and live working with a client, getting that information in front of them, getting the answers that they need. So I know that social was a big focus for people being on social on the mobile app, getting questions answered, getting, quick access to kind of information for a client while they're there in person in front of them. Okay, cool. So using kind of like, community driven kind of question and answer formats for retail workers. So that's kind of one pretty significant use case as well. And obviously, Kaz, I know that you've worked with a number of customers, and Ian, obviously, you're probably hearing them as well from prospective customers. What are the use cases we think the employee app, serves? Like, I'll tell you what. Why don't I go with one? For me, one of the use cases I've always discussed, because believe it or not, I did once upon a time work with customers. They let me out of the office, which was a very high risk maneuver, but I used to work with customers, and they would talk about alleviating the pressure of managerial trickle-down communications for frontline workers. Now, I know we don't want to just talk about frontline workers, but internal comms strategists would be saying, okay, what I do right now is I send an email newsletter to everyone who works in an office, and then when it comes to frontline workers, I print off a piece of paper and hand it to team leaders, and then team leaders will have a huddle, a stand-up, and they'll read that piece of paper out to the employees who are frontline workers. So I think a really big use case that I often hear about is internal communications. It is, how do I provide better quality, straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak, communications, where I can speak directly to my frontline workers. The same way they kind of check in on the BBC News articles and things like that, but, something that's coming directly from their leadership team. So that's another use case that I often see.
I wonder, though, from the communications perspective, though, the types of content that you can communicate via mobile versus desktop. I mean, is that fundamentally different in your mind?
No, actually, I think that's a good point. I think, I think that most things can be reformatted to kind of work well on all devices. I mean, mobile screens are getting bigger by the release anyway. They barely fit in your
especially
pocket.
Yours, Matt. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Whatever. They're jealous. Trust me. For
the record, Matt has one of those new folding phones with the.
It's like a dinner menu.
And he talks about it every time I see him.
It is good. And other phone providers are available. There's no promotion on this podcast.
There is one other use case that I kind of wanted to talk about, which is sometimes I forget them because you're so used to doing things on your mobile. You have to kind of question, actually, what am I doing on my mobile and why? And like, for me, there's a couple of things actually, as I explained. The first one is around the quickness of the way different apps can talk to each other, meaning that, the reality is the average person has many different apps on their phone, right? There may be social apps for Twitter or LinkedIn. There may be their Microsoft Teams app that they use for chat. And part of the utility of having a good employee app is making those things speak to each other in an instant. So like being able to, we were speaking about comms, being able to push out a news article and send that to Microsoft Teams, being able to click that and go straight into the employee app, then being able to share that news article and share it with your colleagues or with your wider network in LinkedIn or in Twitter. And you could probably do that in 2 or 3 clicks, because that's the value of a good app and having it on a mobile device. You've got that kind of quick action going from one app to the other. So that's a big thing. The other thing that I actually used, so we had a masterclass in Stockholm on Tuesday, and was flying with British Airways. Also, one of our customers didn't have Wi-Fi. So what I did in advance, I downloaded a couple of those articles that I hadn't read, because my app told me articles that I hadn't read yet. Took a couple with me so I could read them on the plane. And it's weird because I didn't actually note that I'm using the employee app to do that, because it's just so inherent now. But there are a couple of use cases as well that give value to the employee app, specifically being on the go and being quick.
I think offline reading is a big one, because too, in a lot of our clients that are worldwide, there's not great access to networks and, Wi-Fi in some of the remote areas. So being able to kind of click on those offline articles and being able to read and have that information in front of them is very helpful without having to be connected.
Yeah, and I think when we talk about use cases for the employee app as well. Obviously, it's easy to kind of say, comms, things like that. But I think another one that's actually really useful is when employee apps are utilized for the use case of providing like a superior kind of user experience layer over other fundamental services. So kind of like the one that I always draw to mind is another kind of leading kind of global airline who do the kind of shift management stuff through the employee experience platform. Because what they realize is, the employees go to the places where they get what they actually need critically to do their work first. So you can't not check your shift, because if you don't turn up for your shift, you probably don't have a job. So they know they have to go and look at the shifts. So then they take the employee app and they say, okay, cool. So what's the first thing I put in the employee app to get people kind of using it? And they start with that, and then they know they can piggyback off of that activity into things like getting people more culturally aligned through communication, getting people involved in communities of best practice through social, like Leslie was saying, distribution of product knowledge or kind of, Q&A forums. And they can kind of help, build off the back of that one fundamental piece first, which is like I think a really kind of, I think you'd refer to it as kind of a land and expand kind of strategy, get them in one thing and then start like getting them hooked in with others.
I guess that's the where we speak about experience, or like the employee experience app, that's kind of the point of it. It's the experience part of it, and there's an app for everything, but there are parts of other apps that you want to bring into your employee experience layer because they add value and because the experience is better.
So I guess kind of having talked about some of the use cases for the employee app, my next big question is, why do you think it is then that with the app being kind of second nature to most of us now, able to hold kind of useful information to help us do our job, get our work done, and involving us in more kind of learning and information kind of delivery for our jobs to do our kind of very best work, why do you think it is that mobile adoption of employee apps is kind of seen as such a challenge? Big question. Who's feeling brave?
Well, I mean, I've actually had a conversation this morning with a prospective client around the mobile app specifically, and they frankly have a lot of concerns around adoption and privacy. If they don't have company managed phones and these employee apps are going onto personal mobile devices, there's always that sort of layer of complexity that exists because it's sort of intertwined with your job and your business as opposed to your own personal consumption. So I think like culturally there might be some resistance for an everyday employee to download an app like that to their phone, right, wrong, or otherwise. So I think there's a lot of additional concerns that exist when you put it within the realm of work as opposed to my everyday life or Uber or ordering food or things of that nature.
There used to be I remember kind of working with large companies a few years ago. There used to be a mentality of if employees were downloading or having an app on their personal device, for example, that they'd want to manage the whole device. But over time, there's been a bit of a shift where companies don't want to or understand they don't need to manage the whole device, but they just manage that specific application. And I know that's a bit of a technical thing, but I think it's also a positive thing that we're kind of moving from this idea that we don't necessarily want to or can't use personal devices for these apps, but actually we can because technology is advanced and mentalities have changed in terms of how we manage that.
I think that actually is like an interesting development because a lot of times, I think the concern was initially for the business itself. And while those still exist when it comes to deploying these mobile applications, I think nowadays it's more so, it comes down to your employees and whether or not they want to use it and whether or not they want to adopt it. I think a lot of them understand that it's not like a monitoring device. I think that's always sort of like the paranoia and the sort of reptilian part of your brain where you're like, they're going to use this to watch me or something. But, it's just, we want to be able to keep you up to date on what's going on, things that are going to be important for you. And we hope that you have a good experience while you're doing it.
Genuinely thought you're going to say, we just want to keep tabs on you.
Always watching
But
you,
keep
Wazowski.
you up to date.
Always watching.
Yeah, the big brother activating the camera on your phone. Oh, out for a dog walk, are we? I mean, we have talked about, you know, being able to take meetings while on dog walks previously. So anyway, I digress. I interrupted. Leslie, your point.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think that a lot of clients come in wanting to have the employee app as part of their launch experience. But I think the ones that really focus on it think about mobile first design and talk about, and when we're going through page design structure, they really focus on, well, what's the experience on mobile first versus what's the experience on desktop, and then how do we adjust it or leave it for mobile. And I think that's where some of those organizations that really know that their personas have a high need for being flexible and on the go, I think that's where that differs a lot, where people are actually designing first for mobile and then thinking about desktop.
Yeah. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think mobile is often considered an afterthought. And actually, I think sometimes we're a bit of a victim, or we end up being a victim of the increasing quality of technology, because what a lot of apps do very well is that they'll just convert what you've done for desktop into a mobile design automatically for you. So you can say, well, I know that the page won't look terrible, the content won't look awful on mobile.
I mean,
because it's automatic,
yeah.
right?
You can, and that's one of the beauties of Unily, is that we do that. But yeah. I think that a lot of times when you're designing for mobile, people think about streamlining the content and making sure it's the most important content that gets seen and served up on mobile versus just kind of loaded on a page.
Completely agree. Very quick it could be a big kind of turn off when you're trying to like engage with the content. If you ever see like any kind of hint of a scroll bar and you realize how long a page is, you're like, God, I'm going to get arthritis in my thumb just from reading this one news article or looking at this one HR page. I'm out. You just back out straight away. There's got to be a better way to do it. I agree with you. It is a challenge. Well, then let me ask you this, Leslie, because we talk about employee experience, and one of the things that actually Forrester said at Unite, for those of you who didn't see Cheryl McKinnon's session, she talks about multifaceted, multi-talented employee experience teams, where we have more dedicated roles that focus on specific aspects of what we're doing as part of the employee experience. Do you think there's a space within that kind of multi-talented team for someone dedicated to the employee app, if that's going to be a big part of your play?
I haven't seen it yet, personally, but I would definitely think that there's room for that, at least. And we always talk about how, the teams and the different roles, but I think having somebody who is focused on mobile, if not the whole team, because I've seen teams where they are absolutely mobile first, but I think having someone who is specifically looking at that experience would absolutely help, especially when it's so key, to the organization. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Especially if there are people who are going to rely exclusively on that kind of device for their access. You're at like a crossroads, really, where employee engagement is important, but you're maybe not looking at the device type specifically that your people are actually going to be, or maybe from a frontline perspective, that a large portion of your workforce might be looking at it through that lens, right? I mean, I've had a lot of people who will do a beta pilot, focus groups with those users, because I think that it's one thing to have your perspective on how people are going to use it, but then it's another to actually see how they want to engage with it, or their suggestions and how they want to use the employee app. I think that helps a lot when it comes to design, when it comes to structure, when it comes to features that they're focused on.
When it comes to that, like designing and configuration perspective, I mean, are you seeing clients having more than one type of mobile experience based around different personas, or is it something that they want to be sort of unified and consistent so that way, if you were trying to explain it to one of your colleagues, you know that it's the exact same way as you experience it?
I mean, I guess you absolutely can. I think we have a lot of flexibility in Unily to be able to do that if you wanted to. I think it would take a little bit more planning and a lot more understanding of what your users are attempting to do and what kind of information they're looking for, what kind of features they want to see and use. So it may take a little bit more planning. It may take a little bit more digging into your user research. But I think there's absolutely that flexibility, and that may be the next kind of evolution that we see, is not just mobile first design, but variations of mobile designs for your personas and your groups.
Yeah, because if I think about like, you know, sales enablement and people who are traveling for work versus folks that might be working in like a production floor or a warehouse, very different needs, very different tools that they access. You know, I know we can accomplish all this. I wonder just how many people are taking that on and, you know, how they're administering it.
I think it's definitely becoming much more popular and nuanced. I think people have that whole journey of having an employee app. I think a lot of people have taken a big step into that. And I think the next logical part of that is understanding, okay, the variations of that. I know from one of our customers, they are in the process of, or they're in the process of implementing a device-specific experience, because they know that in some of their kind of waiting rooms, they have a specific shared mobile device. And they know when people go into that room, they do it to check where they're next going. So they're going to kind of design, they're going to know when this type of employee logs in on this device, which is a company device, then actually they want to prioritize some of the more productivity focused parts of that help them understand where their next flight is, for example. I think that's a good example of something where it's like, actually you're starting to understand who are we designing for and what does their day look like. And that's what I think people probably should be asking themselves, is that question. It's not just we have mobile users and we have desktop users. We have all employees that use mobile devices. What do their days look like? What are the types of employees we have? How can we design an experience within mobile that complements that? So hopefully people are, if not there, they're on that journey. Or if not, this is a big push for it.
Well, and I feel like you also did raise like an interesting consideration of not just like what are they trying to do, but when are they accessing it. So it's sort of understanding throughout the course of a day when somebody logs in, what are they trying to see, and building around that experience as opposed to having anything and everything available to them at any given point on the mobile app.
I think there's always opportunity to improve and enhance. So if you haven't done that today, you know, if you haven't designed your experience for the employee app today or for various users in the app, there's always an opportunity to evolve and do that later on. That's the beauty and the flexibility of, you know, of what we do, is that there's always room for improvement and enhancements and adjustments.
Thank God we're flawed, right, folks? We can always get better.
Okay. Well, turning our attention to a note of positivity momentarily, I'm interested to know if there are people on the call who are here learning about employee apps, you know, what they can do with them, what other organizations are doing with them. What do you think are the top features you'd encourage them to look for in a great employee app? Can you give people advice? You know, we talked about that Clearbox app report. There's obviously going to be a lot of stuff in there, but you know, what do you think are the best features?
I think that this is kind of comes back to what I said a bit earlier around the how quick you can get from one app to the other. I think one of the values of an employee app is the ability to inherently share content from one platform to another. So I think you've got to have like solid sharing capabilities. If you're consuming content within that, you need to be able to quickly share and copy that link, send it via email, send it via Teams, promote it in LinkedIn or whatever it may be. That's the value of mobile, is being able to disseminate that news and that information as quickly as possible. So you got to look for solid sharing capabilities. I have more if
that is a good one. I'm trying to think. I mean, honestly,
the other one actually I'll steal from you, Ian, which was about the community focus of it. So it has to have good social elements as well, being able to create a community around. I stole that one from you because you were speaking about that a little bit earlier, but that for me is a foundational part of a good app.
Socials. I think social's a big one because I think that's how a lot of people engage with some of those enterprise grade apps anyway. And so people are used to that and they expect that. So the ability to communicate out with different groups or different communities, ask questions, get answers, find information on social, that I had a client call it the snackable content. So I guess it's that TikTok effect, the bite-sized pieces of information that they're really looking for. So that snackable content is going to be important on an employee app.
I think it's important to remember as well that the social community part of it is not just for fun. There actually are, I've seen some from our own customers, some really good outcomes come out of sharing some of this knowledge. There's been people that have created groups of people that work in the same location, for example, and you've got new employees and some of them will share knowledge on it, or I saw one example where they would share knowledge across different teams that were based geographic in different locations, and would if they had like excess stock, for example, they would post it on that group, and then those in a different factory would be able to see that, and they'd be like, oh, actually we have a high demand for that, so we're able to kind of stock swap across different locations. So there are actually really good business outcomes that can come from being able to create communities in a social communities in employee apps as well.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the best parts of the employee app, I have to say though, has to be things like tying into native hardware. So being able to send push notifications to people's phone quite simply. If you think about really just at the most basic level, notifications through to your device that keep you alerted of things that are happening, whether it's relating to business change or whether it's relating to, specific role related information for you as an individual. I think kind of that push notification piece is kind of really quite critical. The other thing is we talk about social community building, and I think it can be easy to forget that we have cameras in our pockets, right? The other really cool thing is the ability to actually contribute more to the social community than just kind of the commentary. It's about being able to attend company, events and share kind of photos of you and your peers, celebrating wins or just hanging out, being able to attend internal company conferences and record some, a great session and kind of share it with your colleagues as well. These kind of use cases, this kind of ability to capture moments really, and kind of share them instantly from your phone, I think kind of really feed, to an employee app that's lively and feels alive as well.
I had not a Unily example, but I think it would be great and would be amazing if a client took advantage of it. Is we had an HVAC system kind of overhaul at my house, and our salesperson who was doing the inspection was recording training videos for his team as he was walking through our house doing the inspection, showing them what they should be looking for and doing. And he was like, hopefully that you don't mind that I'm doing this. And of course not. But I think that's a really great opportunity to use that feature, video on social, to be able to give those kind of quick mini training bites, on the go is really important. And I think that was a great example of how we could use it.
Well, it's interesting that you referenced something like HVAC, because before I ever worked in technology, I was a project manager in construction. And so I did a lot of data collection while you were out in the field somewhere. So you're taking photos, you might be gathering certain measurements or something to that effect, and having forms and other ways to capture that information within your employee app, and then having it route to the right person so that way they can, perhaps analyze it, whatever the case may be. I feel like it's actually a really basic but overlooked feature that could be really helpful for a lot of industries, especially outside traditional like professional services or other white collar type industries.
As you can see, we've already burnt through almost 45 minutes talking all things employee app. So I think it's been a really good discussion. I've got an interesting question. So we talk about employee app. What, thinking about the different ways that we work, what's the most interesting or unique scenario in which you've used your own employee app?
Ooh.
That's a good question.
It's a good question. I know, it's a good question. One that I wasn't prepared for.
That's why I asked it.
I know. I mean, I think that the biggest way that I use it is for social. I mean, I like to go in, this is my personal opinion, for social, to go see what's happening around, the organization. What kinds of things are people asking for help on? What kinds of things are people kind of sharing out there, and what's new and what's interesting. So
I mean, I do remember having to get to Salesforce at one point while I was in Turkey to close out an opportunity that I'd won. So, I mean, that's not interesting, but it was definitely the more complicated thing that I had to do.
And you went through the employee app to get to what you needed to?
Yeah, I was at a restaurant. It was like, I don't know, it was like 10 o'clock at night, and they signed. I was like, oh, nice. Better close that out real quick.
That's a good one. See, that's a good one, because you never know, like, it's unlikely you're going to get your laptop out and just slap that down on top of your tagine. That's Turkish, right? If it's not Turkish and it just made me sound ignorant, we can cut that bit out as well.
I think it is. It's close enough.
Yeah. What about you, Kaz?
We didn't actually discuss this throughout, but we have our ideation platform within our app. And so I think one of the most, I always think of things at the times, not when you're there trying to come up with an idea to improve something, but like 10 minutes before bed, I'm like, oh, that's a great idea. And I'm not going to boot my laptop up and write an idea and send that to my platform, send that on our site. But my mobile is there just before I'm setting my alarm. I'm able to quickly write that idea and post it. So
the shower principle.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thinking of ideas to improve Unily. 5 minutes
real.
It's great.
Yeah. In one of the early podcasts during the pandemic, we were like doing some reading ahead of the podcast, and I read about it, and it's to do with the fact that when you shower, your brain releases like a chemical cocktail basically, which encourages more free thought, which is why all your good ideas come in the shower. It's true. It's really interesting.
It's true. The shower principle is true, and it's about relaxing your mind, doing something that you're not thinking about what you should be thinking about, but it comes to you. Same thing with like exercise. I think that helps too. Just getting out and getting some fresh air.
Unfortunately, my fancy foldable phone isn't waterproof, so I can't really like get ideas into the employee app while I'm in the shower. But
I'd be worried about Big Brother there. That's where.
A disclaimer: Unily has no Big Brother software in its employee app. If you choose to use it, you are safe. The one that I always maybe this is bad. I don't know. Maybe we're touching on the. Oh, we don't want to cover this topic today. We could be unpacking another whole topic. But sometimes when I like go out on a nice walk, like, around, with the dog, I'll get the app out to kind of read what people are posting and kind of have a little look in the social communities as well. But I guess that's like, that's the high availability of the phone, isn't it? Like that you could be out on a walk and then, you're kind of reading your social communities. But that's kind of, as you say, you don't know when like you're going to have like that amazing idea or see somebody who's asked a question who you want to help out. Like one of the things we do a lot with our social community, we have a knowledge community where we
literally answer Q&A. All of us just kind of mob together to kind of like answer the most burning questions across the business, which is great. And it's really rewarding actually to be able to share your knowledge with people. So, well,
too much
been intriguing. It's been another wonderful discussion with our panel covering all things Employee App. For those of you interested in finding out more about Employee App, there's a great bit of reading to be done in the Clearbox Employee App Report, which you can get from unily.com. So do have a look through that. You'll find lots of extra information. And as always, we will be returning soon with more wonderful content from our panelists. So big thank you to Leslie, Ian, and Kaz for joining us and talking Employee App today. And we will see you on the next one.